What happens when you give two writers the same writing prompt? Two really good writers. What do they come back with? Two completely different stories in their own style. It's really, really interesting. Well, me and Diane Callahan from Quotidian Writer did a writing prompt together, and we went away and wrote our stories, and we came back, and today we're going to reveal our stories to each other and see what we think, and we're going to talk through our writing process.
The
Recording in progress.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, got it. I know it's very intense sounding, so
Yeah.
I'm sorry that my books are like blinding. The sun at this angle is so bad, but I can't block it right now.
Oh, it's okay. At least you can still see that nice George Orwell book somewhere.
Yes, that's the important part. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's okay. So who's gonna reveal their story first? Should we do like rock, paper, scissors or something?
Oh yes, let's do rock paper scissors for
Okay.
it. Yes.
All right. So 3, 2, 1, go, or 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
3,
3, 2, 1, go. I
Okay.
agree.
All right. All right. 3, 2. Oh, hold on. This is gonna be strange over camera, isn't it?
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
So you lost. I have rock.
Okay.
So that means that you have to go first.
Okay. All right. I'll open it up. I'm really excited to see what you think. All right. I'll read it out. Do you know what I found most difficult about this? It wasn't the story itself. It was getting it down to 250 words. I found that really tough. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, because I feel like I've gotten a little more used to writing in this space where I know how, like, okay, this story has enough for this space without going over. But then when I wrote pretty much every single first draft, it's going to be about like 280 or 300. And so I have to cut 50 words, which is harder than you would think in a story like that, where you're like, well, I want that detail. Oh, I need that little bit of dialogue. And then over time, you find ways to just sort of really, really trim it down. And yeah, so that's part of the fun, I think, is to have that constraint of 250 words.
Yeah,
so.
I felt like it really narrowed it down to everything that was just necessary. And everything else was, I don't know, decoration, you know. Okay, here we go. All right.
Okay.
Oh, all right. The moment you die, ghostly apparitions from the next world sing to you a final song. Beautiful and haunting. Death scares me. There must be someone who can tell me how long I have left. Yes, there is a man. He is from this world and the next. He will know the day you die. Ask him, and he will give you your answer. Where can I find him? Go into the forest at midnight, and he will be there. So at midnight he went into the forest. I have come to know the time I have left before I die. And the man said, but life is to live. Why spend it waiting for death? How can I live my life knowing one day I'll die? Please give me an answer. The man reached into his pocket. Here, take this hourglass. Don't let go. Don't put it in your pocket. Don't put it on your mantelpiece. Hold on to it tight until the time runs out. When the hourglass stops, you will have your answer. He went home. He watched the hourglass, waiting. A year passed. Another year passed. 50 years passed. His legs were weak, his cheeks were gaunt. He spent his entire life waiting to know how long he had left. One day, the hourglass stopped. Where is my answer? How long do I have left before I die? At that moment, he heard singing, beautiful and haunting. He finally had his answer, and he died of old age. There we go. What do you think?
Oh, this is beautiful. I love that so much.
Oh.
Like, it's very on brand for you as a folktale story, and just, yeah, no, it's lovely.
Thank you.
It's just beautiful.
Thanks.
Yes.
250 words on the dot. On the dot. Yeah.
I mean, it didn't feel like 250 words. It felt longer. Like, I felt like I knew the whole arc of the story, you know, like it felt like a full, almost, you know, a short story, a novel, but 250 words. That's impressive.
Oh, thanks. I love that. That's my favorite story I've ever written, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think it's because it's just so short and so, you know. I recorded a video for it with music and sound effects and stuff, and it's been sat there waiting, and I'm like, oh my god, I want to put it out, you know. But
that's amazing, and I love the themes of all your stories. Really, that they sort of have not so much like a life lesson or a moral, but just something for people to ponder about.
Yeah.
You know, that just that idea, and I think, you know, since the prompt for this was to write like a ghost story that has, you know, the action of singing and the word hourglass, I think that it has that ghost story feeling of, you know, of death, and then of just the idea of ghosts being all around us and being able to become a ghost ourselves. I think yes, it has the feeling of that. So.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad. I'm really glad. I'm so interested to see what you've got, because it's gonna be. I bet it's so different. I bet it's really good, but I bet it's really different.
Yeah, it is. This one is different. I will say, because I wrote 3 different stories, because I was throwing away my first one. So my first one was slightly similar to yours, but not like yours is way better. But this one is a different tone entirely than yours, I think. So that'll be interesting.
Really quickly checking.
Yes.
You know, how do you know if it's recording side by side or if it's doing?
Yeah, so if you have the view that you're doing, it's so if you go to the right-hand corner in the view, so if it's going speaker view is if you see it switching back and forth, then it's recording one at a time. But if it's gallery view, then it will have both of us there.
It's selected as speaker. Do you reckon that's all right?
Yeah, you can just keep it as speaker, and then you can splice back and forth, and then you can always, like, I wonder if we can change it in the middle, but I'm not sure. But we can.
Should I
we
try?
Can always, I think speaker view probably works for this telling portion, and then we can always, you know, in the recording and try to do another one with a side by side. So that might work better because, you know, we're each reading our story, and then
That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
That way they don't have to see me just staring the whole time that you're reading, just like nodding and
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hear your story.
Okay, so I did put a title on it, which I didn't count towards the word count, but it's called A Touch of the Spine, and mine came in at 246 words, but it was originally 250, but then I cut a few more just because.
Okay.
Here we go, my ghost story. I'd had my eye on Elizabeth ever since I died. She visited the library often, plucking fairy tales off the shelf, singing under her breath as she sashayed down the aisles, oblivious to the handsome desk clerk's longing gazes. Elizabeth was the type of girl I'd been jealous of when I still had a heart, before jealousy killed me. She paused in front of the shelf that contained what bound my spirit there. Her fingers trailed so close to the book with the hourglass embossed on its spine. Then she turned away. Invisible, I whispered in her ear, "Take the book." Elizabeth gasped. Her hand fell upon the book with the hourglass, and that was enough. I swept into her open, waiting mouth. My new body filled me with sensations, the smoothness of the book's leather binding, the sweet smell of decaying pages, the twisting rush of Elizabeth's fear coiled in my stomach. With my own soul as the knife, I cut her soul into slivers. "Do you need help with anything?" Behind me, the handsome desk clerk wrung his hands. I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I found what I needed. It's cold back here, though." I feigned a shiver. He blushed. "Some say this section of the library is haunted." "Is that so?" I tucked the book under one arm and looped the other through his, deepening the pink in his cheeks. Elizabeth's silent screams fought to claw their way free, but now I was free.
Oh, damn. Oh, that was insane.
It's
Wow.
like
That's a proper ghost story, that is.
it's
Wow.
more like a semi-demonic possession story. So
That's really cool. Oh, that reminded me of a really great film I once watched. Oh, what's it called? It's the one where like they have a procedure done to them or something, and they get pushed back into their subconscious, and someone else takes over, and they're like in the back watching a screen as someone else watches and does stuff with their body or something.
I don't remember what that is, but I think I definitely have a thing for the dual inhabiting, like two
Yeah,
people in the same body thing. Like I've always been very
really.
interested in that story concept, like doppelgangers, that sort of thing too. So any sort of doubling effect is interesting to me. So this is, for me, based on other stories I've written, this is very on brand because I feel like this is the type of, it's almost more horror in the horror spectrum. I feel like, yours is the folktale end, and then yeah, I went full creepy with this one, but
Wow, how interesting! Like how different they both are. That just absolutely fascinates me. That.
it is. I know. It's yeah, and in the New York City Midnight Contest where they do this style of story, it's they get maybe 50, 100 submissions that are all writing towards like one prompt. Like
Yeah.
everybody, they split people into groups, and then they judge them all based on that same prompt. So yeah, you have to have to best fit the prompt to get to the next round. But yeah, I think for this one, I really leaned into the ghost story angle. Like with the other stories I'd written, the other ideas I had, I leaned more into like the hourglass one or the singing one. But then for this version, I was like, no, I want to have like the ghost story be sort of the most obvious element because the singing is very slight, like it's at the beginning to characterize Elizabeth. And the hourglass is also, it's like it's a symbol, but it's not a big part.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's really it's interesting to see how just focusing on one out of the three prompts more changes the entire story. Because I focused on the very first thing that I went with was what can I do with the hourglass, and then I tried to fit in the ghosts somehow, and the ghosts could be singing and something. It was almost like those were the two in the background where it all revolved around the hourglass.
yes, and I really wanted with hourglass, I was kind of hesitant. Like I didn't want to use it too literally. Like here, I just used it as a symbol on the book. But in the first story I wrote, I wanted to have like, oh, what if there was like an hourglass shaped city that has like a passage in the middle, and then that's like some kind of hourglass city. So I like that idea. And then I had one of my bad stories was about like a ghost cat that has like an hourglass shaped white patch of fur on its belly and stuff. So I was trying to think of different ways to use the hourglass creatively, but then those stories didn't turn out as good as this one where I went more towards like the ghost angle. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really creepy. I really liked that. Shall I change over this thing now?
Yeah, let's try it.
Let's see if I
try
can do
Let's
it.
see. It'll be hard to know if it will change, but maybe it will.
We're still recording? We are.
Yeah. So if it's still if it looks good.
Yeah, it says recording.
Okay.
Lovely.
We're good.
That's good to know. Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm really interested about your other two stories as well. You mentioned a cat, and
Yeah, that one was just like a girl who she didn't like her cat and her cat died and now it's haunting her. So every time she tries to sing and she's a very bad singer, this cat with the hourglass shape of fur it comes and haunts her house in very annoying ways. So that was more like a comedy, like a comedy ghost. And my first story though, that was the one I was saying was slightly similar to yours, was the hourglass city. And then there's one half is inhabited by ghosts and the other by the living. And then once you hear the singing, you go to the other side, very literally. And then so there's a husband and his wife wakes up in the middle of the night and she hears the singing. He can't hear it, so he knows that she's gets in a trance and basically walks away through the passage to the other side. And then so it's sort of like and then at the end he hears the singing too, and then he goes over to join her on the other side. So that one was more of like a love story, ghost story.
I really like that.
I know. That's why I was like, it sounds like something that you would write too. Because I heard that the creator of the show, The Haunting of Bly Manor, he talked about how, every ghost story is really a love story. And so I was very enamored by that idea of, ghost stories as love stories. But yeah, I think like with that one, I felt like there was too much world building required for a 250 word story. So
I found that in
tough.
in my story, right, I found that I was like, there was so much story to say, like the events that are happening. I'm like, okay, I need to like try and move it forward so quickly that I didn't even have the space to like say who the characters are, or say like if there's more than one or two characters. They literally just start speaking and then just assume that there's two people there or something, you know.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why with the story of this length, it really helps to choose the roles of the story of the people first. Like, because I felt, I had like husband, wife, like that's very easy to go into. And I feel like with your story too, it's sort of the main character is somebody that we can all identify with. Like he's sort of like an everyman character. So I felt like that means that you don't have to really, flesh them out necessarily. And then, yeah, the story I went with, I did first person. I did just Elizabeth has a name. Handsome desk clerk just gets the role name for his credits. But yeah, so I think that is the challenge of once you get a shorter and shorter story, that means you have less and less room for characters. So yeah, I think you can only really do like max 3 with 250 words. But yeah.
I found that it's probably a really good idea to if you're writing a short story. I reckon if you're writing a full story, like a novel or a script, I reckon turning it into a short story first, or coming up with a short story before you even start plotting it out. I reckon it would be really, really useful.
Absolutely. Like it's a way to kind of get a taste of the world and the tone and the characters, like especially if you're trying to explore for like a certain character that you're like, I don't really understand them. I want to see what they're like. And then you put them in this one scenario as like the short story. But yeah, because I know that like a lot of authors, they do that. They sort of start out doing a short story that they later expand into a novel-length work. Like I thought that The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, I think that started out as some type of short story novella, and then he expanded it. But so I think is definitely a good approach. So.
Well, I wonder if, I said that I was kind of struggling to think of what my writing process was. I was like, I don't know, I just sort of came up with it. And I know I had a writing process. I was like, I know there was something going on up here. And I was like, okay, I need to really think about this. So I wrote a few notes down about what I think happened up here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I could read them out, but I'd also love to know if you had a particular thought process of questions you asked yourself, or things you thought of. You already said about a few things, like you focused on the ghost story aspect more.
Yeah, I have more of like a systemic process, and I'll go through that later. But I'm so curious to hear what you have to say, because I know initially you're like, I'm not sure, and I feel like that's such a difficult place to go from. Like, well, how do I actually unpack how my own mind works, right? So I'm very curious to hear.
Yeah, well, I had to properly think about it, because it was probably like an hour after we had our call, and I was like, oh, I have an idea, I have to write it down, and I just sort of wrote it down, and then after about half an hour I'd had mostly a finished story, just needed to chop it down a bit. But I was like, no, I did like ask myself questions, and I did pull up a document that I've got for these short stories that I look through if I want to write this particular type of story. And I have two actually, and I just scrolled through them. And then I just had ideas from it, but I wanted to really figure out what the questions I was asking myself were to get those ideas from what I was reading. And the two documents that I have, I'll tell you what they are, shall I? Okay, so the two documents that I have for these types of stories, when I want to write like a folk tale-y sort of story or something you hear around the campfire or whatever, I have one just called Old Tales, and it's just a bunch of things that it's really just about the style of folk tales, I suppose, and the elements of those sort of stories. And I'll go into that in a sec. But the other one is called it's called Virtues. And I'd love to do a video on this. Maybe we could do a video on this, actually. I don't know. But I really wanted to do a video at some point about virtues, because I feel like they're really, really useful. Understanding the different types of virtues and how they can be used in stories. And there's loads of different types. There's the five virtues of chivalry, I think. The Knight's Code, I believe. And you can see, have you ever seen the film The Green Knight?
Oh, I haven't. Yeah, I heard such great things about it, though. My
God. It was just right. It was right up my alley, that film. It's like it's a massive folktale-y sort of. They took the story of the Green Knight and they turned it into a film, basically. And I was really interested because it was just the sort of film or the sort of story that I would want to write. And I did some research into it, and I did some research into the story of the Green Knight, and it was about how he goes through various tribulations, testing different virtues, and I wanted to know what those virtues were, and it was the 5 virtues of chivalry. I think it's the 5. I think it's the 5. I think there's 5 virtues of chivalry, and I can read out what they are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I might not have them actually. I think I changed it around because I don't have titles for this. I just have them written out. But these could also potentially. Oh, I know what I did. I'll tell you about that in a minute. There's the 5 virtues of chivalry, but there's also the 4 cardinal virtues, and I know exactly what they are, and I'll read them out. The 4 cardinal virtues are prudence. He who lacks prudence is naive, makes choices and doesn't set goals without reasonable thought of the path ahead. There's justice, so he who lacks justice is focused on self-preservation during tribulation. There's fortitude, so he who lacks fortitude runs from problems, allowing problems to grow until they can no longer run. And temperance, which is in other words moderation, which is to regulate desire, and the detachment from desire regulates our choices, and by moderating desire for pleasure over reasoning, we can remain reasonably fixed on doing good and taking productive actions. So those are the 4 cardinal virtues, and I looked those up, and then there's the 5 virtues of chivalry, and that's a bit more.
Aren't there also the 7 heavenly virtues that are like opposite of the 7 deadly sins?
Yeah, there are. They are, yeah. Those ones are a little bit more vague because I found there's different words for them. Some was faith, some was I can't remember the other word, but it was more religious.
Yeah. Yeah. But so which virtue did you borrow from for that story?
I believe it was prudence. It was interesting because I looked through the virtues and I didn't actually get any ideas from it. But I think that by the end of it, I think it was prudence, because he is so reckless that he wants something that this character won't actually really think about what he's doing. He'll just wait and wait and wait for the answer, not realising that he's going towards death, waiting to know when he's going to die, So I think that was the virtue. But I didn't actually get any ideas from that. The idea I got from it was the host. I figured out, I wanted to figure out what the host of the story was, or the host of the challenge.
Yes, that makes sense.
And maybe I can talk about that at some point later on, but I feel like I've been rambling a little bit. I want to hear about your story.
Oh, but it's been interesting. Like, so do you feel like you went from, you sort of have subconsciously all these things going on in your mind? I feel like for like a lot of writers, we have stuff that we're obsessed with that we continually write about all the time. Like I was saying, like this idea of 2 people in one body, like I've written a lot of stuff sort of in that vein. And because I know it's sort of one of my things that I write about, I also write a lot about clairvoyance. Like I do when you're reading the story, I was smiling because there's a novel I'm working on where like a man, he can see how people die. So he can't see when they die, but he sees how they die. And so it's a very that kind of structure. So I think that, subconsciously your brain is always pulling from the same well of stories that you are specifically concerned with. So I see that with you, like the idea of the virtues and the folk tales, like how that just naturally bled into what you created. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So
Didn't even think about it like that. That's a really interesting spin on things.
Yeah, because like you were saying that you knew the story would be very different, and the reason I think it's different is because we're all pulling from our own sort of identity as writers. And if you've ever read more than one book by the same author, you start to see the patterns in their writing. Like I read a lot of Laini Taylor, fantasy writer, and she writes like so much about like gods and angels. Like I feel like all her stories and books have that in it. But yeah, so that's something interesting to me. So and I guess it says something about me too, that I'm writing constantly about ghost possession and kind of anti-hero main characters, because I do think I tend to write, maybe she's not an anti-hero, maybe she's just a straight up villain in the story, but yeah, like when I was coming up with ideas, like I said, I have like sort of a system that I do, especially when it comes to using prompts like this. So I just right away I wrote down like each part of the prompt. Like I said, ghost story, hourglass, singing, and then I made a list below that of like, okay, well, how could this appear in this story? So like I said, with the hourglass, it could be the shape of the city, it could be the mark on the cat, it could be an hourglass figure. I could be using it, it doesn't have to be a literal hourglass, although I love hourglasses, which is why I chose that word. And then for singing too, I was like, well, who could be singing? Is the ghost singing? Is like a human singing? Are this some magical stone that's singing? And then for the ghost story too, I was like, well, what do you need in a ghost story? Like, well, you need a haunting, you need some kind of spirit. It needs to have atmosphere. Usually it's very tied to some sort of setting for that. So like one of the stories I'd written was set in a library, and that's why this one was also set in a library, because I was like, I don't know, libraries are atmospheric ghost story places. So I was trying not to write like in a haunted house, because I was like, that's what you expect. So how do I move beyond one step beyond the expected? And so for me, it's about like I try to list the most obvious ideas, every idea that comes to mind. And it's just sort of like almost like a numbers game to sort of get myself to get somewhere that I find interesting. And I think what finally did it for me with this story was I kept trying to write a story about a human interacting with a ghost. And I was like, oh, no, I should just write from the perspective of the ghost. That would be way more interesting to me. And so I think that's what helped me get the story, was like, wait, I want to switch around and do that. Yeah, like I think just knowing what it's like to be a ghost is intriguing to me. So
yeah, have you got any of your stories on online at all? Are they able to? Is there anywhere I can read them? Is what I'm asking.
Yes, you can. Yeah, I have on my website. I'll send it to you, quotidianwriter.com, and then / my writing. I have like a list of my published stories and poems and flash fiction, and then I have some other stuff that it's not published yet because I'm either not finished with it or I'm still shopping around. But yeah, so I have some other like horror short stories, two that they're relatively short. There's one on like a podcast called Tales to Terrify. And so that's like another, and they all spring from something like, I give myself some kind of constraint and I work from that. Like one of them was I wanted to describe what smell would be like to somebody that is smelling things for the first time. So how can I describe smells without using the smell? So, using it with like sensations or something, like to make, like, how do you describe the smell of chicken to somebody who's never smelled chicken, right? Yeah. So I think that's what I kind of see what we're doing here too. It's like, it's an exercise, right? It's a way to get creative when you have just like, okay, you need to do these things. Well, how can I do these things in the most interesting way? So. Mm-hmm.
How do you describe the smell of chicken? Did you write that in the story?
I wrote a bunch of other smells, like really gross smells I was describing. Like I think I can't remember what the smell was, but something like with like Sharpies being like the smell of like, like the feeling of like an electric shock or something like that. So, you try to think connect things in a way. Yeah, so that's I now still think smell is such an interesting trigger when it comes to horror, because horror and smell going together, like making horror as sensory as you can. Like in this story, when I was like, oh, it's so hard in flash fiction to really put, sensory details in there because flash fiction is so short. I feel like I only can say what happened. I can't give you any smells or feelings. So I tried to, that's me sneaking in some details where I'm like, okay, she feels the book, she smells the books, and so I was trying to give that a little more description, but like you said, cutting it down, I was like, I don't want to cut this part, so I had to cut other things in the story to make that work. So
Speaking of horror, I really want to do a video at some point about how I'll give you some backstory. I was watching Planet Earth 2. You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
With David Attenborough. Wonderful.
Yes.
It's just amazing. Some of these things though, like I'd watch some of the animals and absolutely terrifying how like some of the animals hunt or how they attack other animals or something. And there was one called what is it? The lion the I don't know, some it's got the word lion in it, the dirt lion or something, I don't know. And I'll pop it up on screen if I know. And it's a bug that burrows down into the earth and sets a trap, right? And it just keeps its head below the ground and it has this little pit. And other animals come in and they fall in. And every time they try and crawl out, this antlion.
Oh.
The antlion pops up and flicks dust, and it just keeps falling back in until it eventually grabs it and pulls it under the ground. And I'm like, oh my god, that's like something from a horror film. And then I saw other animals who it's disturbing how they attack the its prey in different ways. Like jellyfish, it paralyzes them or something. And I thought, oh my god, like this is like horror films. I wonder if why we get horrified by monsters is something to do with the animal kingdom and all of the different ways we could literally just be killed by animals. And I wonder. Sorry, go on.
No, I mean, I wonder. Yeah, like I wonder how often that happens. Like, I think that there's some type of wasp or bees that like they basically like swarm all of their prey. They like shake them, they vibrate them to death or something, or they overheat them to death. I can't remember. I need to look that up. The killer wasp. But yeah, I think maybe there's something to that our sort of fears of the natural world bleeds into the horror elements.
I was wondering if you could create monsters, really effective, scary monsters based on ways animals kill.
Yes. Yes.
Like terrifying.
Well, I think one of the most terrifying things in just all of nature are mushrooms. Like I think they're so fascinating, but also so alien. And mushrooms are I like that they're mysterious. Some of them are poisonous, some of them are not, and you don't want to get them confused. And then they grow from death, like from things that are decaying. That's like part of their existence. So I think mushrooms are a little goth, and I like that. So also, I'm sure lots of horror writers have written mushroom horror stories, but
there's so many horror stories that involve spores or something.
Yeah,
like The Happening.
Definitely.
The Last of Us. Oh, there's loads.
Yes, exactly. I find humans are the most terrifying things, and that's why, like in my story, it's very much like a man versus man, woman versus woman kind of story, where it's just the human nature that's the most terrifying thing to me, which is really animal nature, I guess, when you get down to it. But
yeah, I think spiders are the most scary.
Spiders, I don't know. Spiders are pretty cute. I don't know. They're poisonous, all right, but they're pretty small. Like if they could move faster, then I would be scared. If they could fly, I know some of them probably can, but.
Oh my god, like Australia, I just see videos of spiders in Australia, like the size of my picture back there, crawling up the wall, like, woo.
I think scorpions are a little scarier, or millipedes, too many legs, and they're poisonous, and they're big, and yeah.
Scorpion, I'm a Scorpio. I am.
You're a Scorpio.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that you're a Scorpion. And so you're not afraid of them, right? So,
No, I like scorpions. I think they're pretty cool.
do you even have them there?
I don't know. No, we don't.
They're cool, but
So, you mentioned that maybe we could give some writing prompts to
yes,
the
yes,
audience.
that's right. Yes, because I made a list in our email thread so that we can pass this along. So if people want to try this at home, it's perfectly safe. Let me see here.
How many did you write?
I think like 4 or 5, and I try to choose different genres so that people have options. Because sometimes, if you get stuck writing like a romance story and you're like, oh no, I don't want to write romance, that's too hard. Let's see. So
I wrote a few as well.
oh, you did? Oh, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll read. I have my list, and then you can read your list.
Yeah, okay.
So I have adventure with the action of cooking and with the word reflection. So and then fantasy, the act of begging, and the word blackmail, and then science fiction, the act of stabbing, and the word talent, and then romance, the act of burying, and then the word glass. And finally, I have drama with the action of jumping, and the word paper. And we can put these in the description, so that makes it a little easier. But yeah, so you just choose one of those sets of 3. Then what are your 3 sets?
Okay.
Sets of 3.
I'm writing a book of short stories, and maybe I'll do what I did with this, and I'll just do loads of writing prompts and stuff.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so all right. I got 5, and I did it a little differently. I wanted to spice it up a little bit. So instead of the genre, I did an emotion instead.
Nice.
So either the emotion the character's feeling, or an emotion that I don't know, the audience feel. So so we've got hopeless with the action of running, and a prop is a music box.
Nice.
The next one is heartfelt with the action of dreaming, and the prop of a journal. The next one is nervous with the action of flying, and a prop of a telescope. And there's 2 more. There's suspicious with the action of waiting, and the prop of a door. And the last one is, I thought this was quite a nice contradictory. I'd love to see what people come up with this one, if they do. Angry with the action of singing, and the prop is a bird.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I love that idea of using emotion, because that kind of gets you out of genre, and I think gets you to like, how can I show that the character is feeling in this way, or how can I make the reader feel this way? Yeah, that's very fun.
I feel like emotion is such a big driving factor for interesting stories. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, so that'd be great. And if people want to share their stories in the comments, they can, or if they want to keep them to themselves, if they want to submit them somewhere, that's okay too. But yeah, we're always very curious to see what people choose and what they end up writing. So
I'd absolutely love to read what people have. I think it'd be really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you want to do another video after this at some point?
Yeah, like with what subject for your channel, or?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I like chatting with you. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I know, it's fun, and this is really cool. I loved the surprise of hearing your story. It was really neat to just see what you would come up with that. But yeah, we should do something. We should try to find something, some type of I don't know, another exercise, another experiment that people can learn something from.
Yeah.
Because what I like about this is seeing, like you said, the different approaches to the same thing so that people can understand that with writing, it's not like there's one way to do it. You know, you can really approach the same thing from different angles and still end up with really interesting stories. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you're up for it, I'm up for it. I'm up for doing another
Yeah.
chat. Great fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, when would work well for you? I know you're going to splice this up for the recording purposes, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure when to end the recording mode and when to go back into real person mode. But
I don't know. We'll end the recording in a sec, I suppose. I guess that's the video done. But maybe people can let us know what they think of our chat. Is it fun, entertaining, interesting? And any ideas for another call? I'd love to know. You know. But yeah, when we can next do one tomorrow. No. I don't know, maybe like in a week or two. When's good for you?
Yeah, I think in like a couple weeks, because I have like a deadline coming up for editing stuff. But I think like a couple weeks, and we come up with a good topic, because like I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but something, you know, I'm really game for anything writing, storytelling related. You know, and we still didn't think of a title for this video.
No.
Did we? I don't remember. No,
No,
okay.
I didn't.
But so if we could come up with something that has a good title, that would be good too.
Yeah.
But
well, maybe we can do that in real person mode when the recording ends. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll end the recording now.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for watching, and see you soon. So the video's ended. I just wanted to say thank you to two people. To Diane, thanks. Lovely chatting with you. As always, really nice. Thanks for coming on my channel. And the second person, you know who you are. Thanks. Bye, everyone.